And so I also am honored to provide an introduction to our keynote speaker, Chair Raul M. Grijalva, who is the chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources. So Chairman Grijalva has represented Arizona's 3rd congressional district since 2002. He is one of Congress's most outspoken champions for endangered species, wilderness, national parks, public lands, and stronger oil and gas regulations. He authored the National Landscape Conservation System Act and Federal Lands Restoration Act, both of which President Obama signed into law in 2009 as part of the Omnibus Public Land Management Act. After he became chair of the Natural Resources Committee in the beginning of 2019, Congress passed the historic John D. Dingell Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act, which, among many other important accomplishments, included permanent reauthorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, a widely supported program that previous Republican leaders on the committee had opposed. Since becoming the top Democrat on the committee in 2015, Grijalva has focused on diversifying the environmental movement beyond traditional activist groups. He has especially emphasized participation in environmental decision-making by Latino organizations, Native American tribes, and other traditionally underrepresented communities. He has a lifetime 96% score from the League of Conservation Voters and is widely recognized as a leader in on public lands and habitat conservation. Chair Grijalva remains one of Congress's foremost advocates for protecting our open spaces, defending tribal sovereignty and treaty rights, respecting our bedrock environmental laws, and restoring the values of long-term planning and environmental stewardship for our nation's economy. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Chair Grijalva to provide remarks. Thank you.
Let me just at the offset, just thank the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, and Dr. Michelle Magalong. Thank you so much. And just to say some brief comments, and to focus on the diversification of the need for and the opportunity to deal with the issue of diversify historic preservation in this country. That includes cultural resources, and I think it includes the most fundamental thing that we need very desperately right now in our country is that that the complete story of America be told. And in telling that story, I think that would do a great deal toward recognizing the level of tolerance and communications that's so badly needed in this country. You know, the stories that have been captured have some intentionally and sometimes not intentionally left out many stories of the public record. The stories that are told in historic preservation and with less than 10% of the listings in the National Register of Historic Places tell the story of people of color in this country. Intentionally left off that public record and the predominance being stories of the majority white community and the predominantly male community. But as we talk today, the opportunity that's going to change is really before us. There is another change occurring in this country, and that change is the demographic shift in this country, and that demographic shift creates a constituency, and it creates the inertia I think that we need as a country to move historic preservation into a more inclusive and representative aspect of the national story, and making sure that we allow our fellow citizens the opportunity to be able to reflect on the stories of a full America, I think is an essential step, because as fellow citizens cry out for racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and demand recognition of contributions to this nation of ours. I think a response to that demand as part of dealing with systemic issues of racism and neglect and discrimination in this country requires a systemic approach as well. And the journey for preservation and to correct these inequities and injustices in the preservation movement and resource movement and in American institutions will be, as all of you know, as practitioners, long and hard. But with this new administration, we're looking forward to, from the Resources Committee, to have an opportunity to make real change. And one of the areas that I've asked the committee leadership, staff leadership, is I want to add capacity to our committee, capacity around the issues of cultural resources and historic preservation, to be able to lend leadership to those issues as well going forward, to be able to work with partners outside of Congress on updating existing legislation and creating legislation that's necessary for these new times. Already President Biden and Vice President Harris have done an enormous thing and promoted progress by nominating a dear friend, Deb Haaland, as the first Native American Secretary of Interior. Historic turn, to say the least, and an opportunity to be able to work with an administration toward common goals, as opposed to feeling like you're always fighting to keep the worst from happening. And we have an opportunity with a Congress that is more receptive and an administration that is thus far has demonstrated that they are receptive as well. And so when I got the opportunity to be chairman, one of the things I wanted to do was to diversify the membership of our committee in terms of the members of Congress, work toward diversifying our staff, and then diversifying the voices at hearings from communities that had not been heard before. And I think in doing so, to begin to change the normal and established way of who we listen to and who we pay attention to. As the good doctor said, to recenter the margins, and that work ahead continues. We made some progress. 2 new Smithsonian museums dedicated to Latinos and women, a sign of progress. While a historic victory, there is much more that needs to be done to ensure that there is broad representation for all of America. I say it having been on the floor of on January 6th, when the mob tried to stop the function of our Constitution and the function of our democracy. And the repercussions from that should not be minimized. That as we work forward, we are also strengthening our institutions. The petroglyphs in Arizona merit preservation, as do the colonial house in Delaware or Connecticut, because they tell the story, the full breadth of the story of this country of ours. Growing up, I had to look for history that reflected any contribution that my descendants made to this nation, and I found plenty. And indigenous people continue to be a marker on the history of this nation, a centerpiece on the history of this nation. And as the demographics change, so too does a constituency that can continue to protect our historic treasures, continue to add to them, and in the long run, lead to the conversations that the American people have to have with each other in these desperate times. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you on pieces of legislation and policy initiatives. I'm looking forward to adding capacity to the Resources Committee to deal with these issues. And I'm looking forward to the idea that this is part and parcel both of dealing with the reality that's before us right now as a country, but also talking about the future. That if we're going to talk about equity, that it has to be the inclusion and the full story have to be part of that equity equation. With that, let me thank you for this time, encourage your work, and invite you to collaborate with us to at least set the foundation and the template for what we think historical preservation can be, and the contributions, huge contributions it can make to the well-being of this nation and its people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva. We appreciate your remarks and applaud your leadership, your bold leadership, particularly in the last administration, in fighting back the drawbacks that we saw in places like Bears Ears National Monument, National Park. And so we thank you, and we know as we enter into this new administration, we also enter into the Department of Interior building, not only with Secretary nominee Holland, but we also know that we have lost a great deal of staff in the last administration, and that we look forward to and encourage individuals. We have over 700 and almost 800 people registered for this symposium, which speaks to the interest, the need, and really I hope, a commitment to filling back up the rooms in the offices at the Department of the Interior, on the Hill, and having champions from across the nation really support your leadership and the work you do in the House Committee of Natural Resources. So I thank you, and we look forward. I know I personally will be looking forward to working with you in this administration and whatever legislation that comes on board. I know that during the Obama administration, you had co-authored and championed the potential of Cesar E. Chavez National Historic Park. Hopefully we can revisit that very soon, and to have even, to be more inclusive even in that legislation, to tell the stories of not only Filipino Americans like Larry Itliong,
yes,
and many of the other Manongs, but to tell the stories of all the other individuals, including women, other women of color, and including Dolores Huerta into that story. So we look forward to that. And again, thank you for your remarks.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the support and the good advice that you've provided myself and my staff. Thank you for that. And like I said, this is an opportunity to elevate the presence of preservation, historic preservation, and we should, working with you, I hope we can take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I hope we can visit you on the Hill sometime soon.
Oh, the sooner the better, but we're trying to get through this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We look forward to it. Thank you, Chairman.